Christian did. And again, let's look at that format because, just do it that way, Kelly. There we go. We're going to have that title page. Okay, I haven't got in to do your APA stuff yet, but you're in line. Okay, you're in line. So we've got that title page, and then we've got the paper. Now, if you put an abstract in, if you have that page in between and you do that abstract, that's up to 5 extra credit points, okay? Not every teacher will require you to do an abstract, and remember, you want to do it after your paper's written because it's a summary of what you said. And it is very much this very self-conscious writing. This paper, I mean, it's what we generally don't do in general writing. APA is much more like this, but I'm teaching you APA format and citation in terms of writing. I'm teaching you general style. But it is a very kind of self-conscious writing where it says, this paper discusses, the effects of advertisements or, messages that are in advertisements looking specifically at this Felix condom commercial. In it, we can see blah, blah, blah. What is your main point? And that's pretty much it. What are you arguing? Yeah?
Is the abstract paper that's included, does it give the writer the information that the reader has no idea?
What you think of it as, if your teacher or your reader was just going to read one paragraph, and your grade or your job or whatever hinged on it, what would you tell them if they were lazy and they weren't going to read the whole paper? It is a 1-paragraph summary, so it does include, what are your kind of I want to say revelations some days, okay? Your conclusions overall and why. Really, it's just kind of what are you looking at? So you start with topic, and then what's your main point, and then what are just some of, you're not giving the whole paper, 1 paragraph, just kind of what are some of the main points you're making about that. That's it. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. So that abstract, and that would be on page 2, and then we would Control Enter or insert that page break and get that next page, and the paper would start here, and then up at the top, remember in that header, the title's in all caps. We've got the different headers, the running head on page 1, and then just the title here. And so you can use a short one. Here, Christian's got her whole title up at the top of her paper, and then boom, just looks like a paper, and then references page. And no matter where this last page ends, whether it's in the middle or down at the bottom, whatever, you always do that Control Enter, insert that page break, and get that new page for your references. Remember also that your references page, your title page, your abstract, those things do not count toward paper length. When somebody says, write a 5-page paper, that means 5 pages of text. And then you got other stuff too, that's just the way it is. So always remember that. So that's what we want it to look like. So keep that in mind. Always remember that last point of proofreading is looking at your paper, looking at one of the samples, saying, do these look alike? And just really look at shapes, look at your paragraphs, make sure you've got those tabs in. Look at that white space, all that stuff. Really just visually inspect it where you're making sure they look alike. So, all right, so here we go. Let's see what Christian has to say. She's got a 2-part title. So it's, here we go. Cool. It's Beamers or Babies, Felix Advertisement or Confusion. And we can have that 2-part title in academic papers a lot. It will, on this next page, give us sometimes another line, sometimes not. If it's really short and it fits in and it doesn't go all the way to the edges of the page, you'd still keep it on 1 line. You can choose to do 2 lines. Usually 1 part is kind of, here's what my paper is, and 1 part is usually something creative, interesting, something like that. So Beamers or Babies, we're like, what? And then what it is. Okay, here we go. And she puts it all in 1 line right here. Okay, we all know that advertisement is the best method to sell or introduce any product to the market, but it's also clear that some companies are also selling certain values to their customers. Sometimes the way an advertisement is used can lead to other subjects other than what is being advertised. Felix Condoms is a perfect example of this advertising in parody form. Instead of promoting that the use of this brand of condoms will prevent sexual transmitted diseases, and there she sets up her abbreviation. So first we have this, and then we have that. We'll do it a different way with the LFDs because they do it that way in the commercial. But if we're not mimicking something like that, it's always spell it out and then put it in the parentheses. And after that, you can just use the abbreviation. Okay, will prevent sexual transmitted diseases or unwanted pregnancies. It's stating these condoms will save people from a poor financial state. In Jesus is a brand of jeans, Kilborn, boom! Date right there. The minute you mention somebody's name, and remember APA, it's only that last name. You write down somebody's name, and they're a source you're using, whether it's their name or it's the Center for Media Literacy, whatever it is, then right after that, put that date. And what do we do if we don't have a date? ND, right? ND. I'm not a dummy teacher. Don't mark this off. Okay? So, right there, Jesus is a brand of jeans. Kilborn says, advertising creates a worldview that is based upon cynicism, dissatisfaction, and craving. Advertisers aren't evil. Excuse me, they are just doing their job, which is to sell a product. But the consequences, usually unintended, are often destructive. So we've got the says, so that's a he said, she said form. So boom, just the comma right there. Gives the quote, and then when we look at Jesus as a brand of jeans, one of the things you'll notice is there are sections in that. So the article starts, and then we get these subtitles, these headers within it. And so we have substitute stories section. So there's our location. We've done author, date, location. Now, if there are any problems with this, I reminded y'all last time, and I'll remind you again, it is not the student, because I turned all of these from MLA to APA. And I know there's some of them that are problems, and I've left them there because I'm like, oh, that was one I had to figure out. So I can show you that because it's kind of common. All right, so she says, look, it gives this mixed message, and then she moves into the Kilborn, where he's talking about, sometimes the consequences are often destructive. So that links in with the idea of what she's talking about. This commercial lives up to that claim. The integrity of youth and the values of men are being stepped on, and through this advertisement, the message that material things are more valuable than family, and that men are more interested in material things than family is being sold. So again, not the condoms, they're what's being sold, that's the product, but what's the idea behind it? What is that technique that's used to get it across? What is that value? What is that whatever? Remember, that's our goal. And so when you're done, as we go through these pre-writings, the question will be, what is being sold here? Right? What is this? What do you see? You answer that question, that's your thesis, just like that. Now, the next thing she's going to do is describe. And so we're going to look at two more samples today, because this is a straightforward, she's analyzing one ad. And if you're analyzing one ad, then you want to, boom, describe it right up front. And then we'll look at two more where we'll look at Louisa's, where she analyzes 3 Burger King ads. So you don't want to describe all 3 up front and then do the analysis. You're going to describe, analyze, describe, analyze, describe, analyze. And we'll look at Jim's, where he takes an idea, a concept, he takes stereotyping, and then looks at ads from 3 different companies. Same thing there. So we're looking at, one of the things we're really looking at is structure here. All right, so describe it to us. Now, think about, you watched it. A lot of times we watch the commercial after we read the paper, and I say, how well did she do it? But you've watched it. Think about how well and how much detail she's getting into this description. This advertisement is set in a nightclub, which is used to make viewers identify themselves with their typical night out. Obviously, this commercial is trying to get young people's attention. Attractive-looking females and handsome-looking men are used to identify the single lifestyle. Throughout the commercial, there are young people flirting and meeting each other. In the background, there's a female humming along with the music. I just said moaning. As the main character in the ad goes on to introduce Felix condoms, he states he's not scared of getting STDs, but petrified of obtaining LFDs. And so here's where we've already set this one up, STDs, so we don't need to spell it out again. But here we're switching it just because this is the way they do it in the commercial, right? They're doing this kind of little surprise for us. Lifetime financial deprivation. He then explains all the things he could buy with the money he would use to pay child support if he had a child. For example, he could have a new BMW every 2 years or a very luxurious home. At the end of the commercial, a young, attractive female approaches him and asks if he's ready. He grabs his condom and replies, always. The ad ends with a printed statement saying, putting a protective layer between you and poverty. Now, we've already said Felix up here, so she just started with this advertisement, and we already have the Felix condoms right there. Now, we're not talking about anything from the commercial at that point, so yes, that's the author, but we don't have to have the date. If you're not talking about giving a quote or something specific, some evidence from it, then you don't need to give that date yet. But here, she didn't use the name because she believes we're smart enough to remember it or look back up there. So we don't have that citation with the date. But at the end, she's got to let us know here's where it comes from. So if you don't do that, that's all going to go. If you don't do it in your sentences, whatever you don't do in your sentence is going to go at the end in those parentheses, right? Either after your quote or here since she's summarizing the whole thing at the end. It's an ad, a video ad, so we don't have any location. So all we need is author and date. Well, this advertisement, it's implicit, it's Felix. So boom, date. Now I would argue, when I put that in, like I said, I did these, Christian's essay was originally an MLA. I would kind of argue now that I've had a couple of years to work with APA more and I've learned it more. I think at this point I probably would put Felix, 2006, but as a teacher I would be fine with this either way because it is clearly, clear that that's what we're talking about. So if you're writing for somebody who's really like hard ass, then, just cover your ass, right? Put it in there all the time. Do I think this is acceptable? Yeah. And not just because it's a mistake I made. I'll show you some that I made that I'm like, ooh, here's what I thought and here's what I learned, okay? All right, so even if you hadn't seen the ad, she paints a pretty good picture of it. And that's what we want because with the literary essay, we're assuming everybody's already read it. We're not told to summarize it or anything. Something like this, though, this is pick your own ad, so you can't assume that everybody's read it or seen it. So we've got to give that description. Okay, now she's going to start into her argument. And, in those body paragraphs, what we're doing is we're saying, look, here's one reason, we're giving evidence, we're discussing it just over and over and over again. Saying that LFDs are more serious of an issue than STDs creates a confusing message, and that links to her overall thesis. Young adults have already been thought of as immature, irresponsible, and thoughtless. In reality, young adults, for the most part, are very concerned about getting sexually transmitted diseases and, as a rule, are responsible. This advertisement contributes to the image of young people being shallow and only focused on going out to party. Now, here so far, she hasn't given like a quote, but this is a specific part of the commercial. She is alluding to specific things that happen in there. And that idea of portraying young people in this situation is very key to this commercial. Additionally, viewers are given the idea that clubs are only places for young people to meet and have sex with perfect strangers. For the most part, nightclubs are not necessarily that way. Many people go to nightclubs with friends and partners to dance, socialize, and have fun. Often they do not have sex on their minds. So there's another example. She's saying, look, here's how it's portrayed, just this idea of just having sex. And then she says, look, here's the reality. So again, not using that I, me, my. She could have said, I don't always go out to dance with thinking, okay, hey, I'll get laid. But many young people. And then she's got to wrap it up saying, what does this do? Playing on a simplistic stereotype of young people contributes to a larger view of how young adults are seen in society. And so here she's taking it beyond just this commercial, but saying, look, when we see commercials like this, this creates this idea that, the youth is bad. The youths. More disconcerting, however. Ooh, that sounds fancy, doesn't it? This is a place to practice that, and those howevers, nevertheless, on the other hand, I always used indeed and clearly. I have to go through my papers and I do find for clearly. Clearly, this shows. Clearly, this indicates. Clearly, when we look at this, we can see. It's like every other word. I'm like, no. That's what your thesaurus is for, the synonyms in Word. That's what that's for. It's not just looking up a word you don't even know or can't think of. It's like, okay, wait, I've got this word, but I know there's a better one out there. And you look at it when you see, oh, that's the better one, not that's the bigger one, not that's the weirder one, anything like that. It's like, yeah, that one. That's what it's for. When you got too many clearly, that's how you use it. More disconcerting, however, are myths about men that this advertisement perpetuates. In this advertisement, having a child is being used as a cause of financial burden in the young community. The commercial implies that for most men, their main concern while having sex with a female is to make sure not to get her pregnant because of the financial burden it may cause. In addition, when the man in the ad gives examples of all the things he could be buying with the child support money, oh, snap. Semicolons, got to have full sentences on both sides, right? When he gives an example of all the things he could be doing with the child support money, oh, comma, 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 comma. It assumes that men are more materialistic than emotional. It suggests that men would rather have occasional sex without any type of responsibility. It assumes that for men today, it's more important to have a nice new BMW in the driveway every 2 years than to have a child. Moreover, it promotes the idea that the status symbols are more valuable than children are. While advocating the use of condoms to prevent pregnancy is not outside of what any condom manufacturer should be doing, by focusing on the value of material things and promoting the idea of men as materialistic, the ad diminishes men who actually take care of their responsibilities without thinking of it as a financial burden, and those men who do value having a family. By default, it sends the message that women are the ones who want children, not men, furthering the stereotype that men are not family-oriented and that women only think of having babies and trapping men into paying child support. How many of you guys out here that don't have kids think maybe someday you might like to have a kid? And if you didn't raise your hand, don't feel bad. If you don't want to have kids, don't have kids. My gosh, right? They're not just weeds you have in your yard, right? And they are expensive. I'm kind of glad I had mine. I tell him, yeah, I'm glad you're around. He cooks dinner twice a week, you know. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. The dishes in the dishwasher should be put away by now. I should text him, right? Should put those dishes away. So this idea, and that's very clear in this commercial, is this guy's just thinking about, you could have a new BMW or a house or anything like that, instead of not saying, you wouldn't want to do this if this was a choice you were making or anything like that, but it's about this material stuff, that it is this implication better than being a father. The ad could be, and that's where she's going, the ad could be constructed as advocating careful choice in childbearing, and that's a noble cause, but instead, the ad points toward a message that being a father is not as valuable as having a nice car or a home. It focuses on material wealth, and by doing so, places human life in a position far below those markers of wealth. Felix sells the myth that possessions are more important than consideration for a partner or family. I think you can tell. I think since I taught Christian, I've got better at teaching commas and semicolons and all that. There are little things in here where I'm like, oh, not there, not there. I can always tell. I'm like, okay, that's good. I've gotten better. So I don't blame my students. Teacher got to teach it well, right? Young people fight against a number of negative stereotypes these days. The idea that they are irresponsible is one of the most prevalent, followed closely by the idea that they are only concerned with partying and having fun. Furthermore, men are cast as uncaring and selfish throughout the media. The examples of this in the Felix ad parody those images, and in doing so make very relevant points. It's a colon. Got to have a full sentence before that. Our ideas of young people, and young men specifically, are views that disrespect their integrity and values. In Idols in the Marketplace, Kavanaugh, boom, got that date right there, writes, if we ask ourselves, what values would we like to see illuminating the lives of our children, students, parishioners, and co-religionists, I think the designer jeans would fall pretty far down the list. That article doesn't have any subheadings or anything. So there's no location there. It's on the web. There's none of those. So that's one time we get to, like with the ad, we get to skip the location. After a close analysis of this advertisement, it's easy to see that Felix condoms would fall pretty far down the list as well. And so there, clearly something she's agreed with, and she says, look, Felix condoms too. Just like that. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Yeah, and she makes it look easy, right? And that's the trick. We're all trying to make it look easy. So when it ends up in that history teacher, that sociology teacher's hands, that computer programming teacher's hands, that education teacher, that nursing teacher, that whatever teacher, you want them to think it was just easy for you. Now that doesn't mean there's not a ton of work behind it. Gotta hide that. So structure makes sense to you? And that's how you do it with one ad. If you're going to do it, you want to put up that description first and then go through. So get that in people's minds. Let's take a look at this.